Welcome to Shambhu Sessions, where we explore the heart, spirit, and stories behind the music. I'm Shambhu, guitarist and composer. My guest today is someone I have shared a creative and personal journey with, guitarist, composer, producer, and sound explorer, Todd Boston. We first met in 2009, and we've been friends and collaborators ever since. Todd is a recording artist. He's toured internationally and performed with some of the most beloved artists in New Age and sacred music, including Snatam Kaur, GuruGanesha Singh, and others in the global mantra and devotional music community, as well as folks like Jeff Oster and Will Ackerman. When I was recording my debut album, Sacred Love, Todd joined me at the studio in LA, where he first met Will Ackerman. He later went on to record his breakthrough album, Touched by the Sun, with Will producing. We'll talk about his latest album, ANAM. Todd also operates his own recording studio where he mixes in Dolby Atmos and masters music, including all of my releases. In recent years, he's been involved in some remarkable immersive audio projects. So in this episode, we'll explore Todd's music and journey, his artistic evolution, his connection to nature, his collaborations and performances, studio life, and the unique creative partnership we share. I'm thrilled to welcome my dear friend, the great Todd Boston.
Hello, Shambhu. Thank you so much for having me today on your amazing new podcast. I'll say it's new because I'm one of the first 10 guests, I suppose.
Yeah.
Honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to have you. We go back to 2009 when I was thinking about getting into music and transitioning from PR, and I heard you play, and I went, holy crap, I want to be that guy. I loved what you were doing. I thought, God, it sounds like me playing. It's just so beautiful. Yeah. And so we became friends early on. Let's go back into your earliest musical journey. You play all kinds of instruments. They're all over your house, on tabletops, music stands, hanging on the walls. When did you first get into music as a kid?
I think the earliest introduction, I was not born into a musical family, so my early introductions into music were really from a love of music through my parents. They had vinyl record player and a lot of music playing in the house, and the most influential music of my early childhood by far was the sound of the Beatles. My parents were into everything from Yes to Simon and Garfunkel, all these interesting bands. But the Beatles were just the most influential. I remember riding around in our little VW bus through the suburbs and downtown Philadelphia and listening to Yellow Submarine or The Octopus's Garden, or, these images of the Beatles were kind of iconic in my household. We had a book that was the art of the Beatles, and it was very psychedelic, and there was nudity in it. And I just remember being a child and seeing this counterculture of the 60s on photos and listening to that music, and it just became a part of my soul, my musical inspiration through life. And when I was about 7 years old, my mother encouraged me to play piano, and that was the first instrument that I started playing. And I didn't stay with it very long, maybe a year of piano lessons, but I did enjoy it. My mother and sister, my older sister, they continued to play. And I think I felt inferior because they were moving much faster than I was. And so I wasn't very inspired at that time to play until I was about 10, 11 years old. And I had a cousin that played acoustic guitar very nicely. And he would hand me the guitar and teach me some chords, teach me some psalms. And the guitar just became my lifesaver. It became the most impactful musical instrument of my life by far. The guitar became my essential instrument, basically.
And did you start studying professionally, or did you just start listening to people and trying to figure it all out?
I was self-taught on guitar. I picked up any book that I could learn from. And I learned mostly through books and from listening. Of course, we were learning by ear mostly then, right? And I was very much into cracking the code when I was listening to the guitar players, the great guitar players that I was discovering. Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton became really essential for my early inspiration. I was trying to figure out what those players were doing, and that pushed me into early blues, all the way back to Robert Johnson and Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, and I just became obsessed with learning the character of each of those players and why their tone and their technique was so different and had such a personality. And it's partly why I love guitar so much, is that each player just brings their own signature sound to it. And I became obsessed with learning that on guitar by listening and playing.
Now, did you play in any bands at the time?
When I was in high school, I played in some bands, and admittedly, I was self taught. I didn't feel like I was a very good musician. I felt like I loved music, and my friends thought I was very good because I could play Eddie Van Halen guitar solos. I could play Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd and sing it okay. And then I would play a guitar solo by Jimi Hendrix. I learned guitar solos a lot. And when I was in my 20s, I became very serious about studying, and I had a mentorship with a great teacher named Ernie Chavarria in Phoenix, Arizona. For about 5 years, I studied really seriously, and he really taught me about discipline and taught me music theory and taught me about being a professional musician, really.
So you started studying with him because you wanted to become a musician.
Because I followed music as a passion, didn't really think of it as a career, but I was obsessed with it. And so even though I went to college to try to get a real job, get a career thing, during my studies at university, I was obsessed with music, and I just was filtering everything through the lens of music. And I just accepted that was who I was, and that music was calling to me really deeply. And so I sought out a deeper understanding of music, of the guitar. I wanted to become great. I wanted to be a great guitarist, not just a good guitarist. And so I found a teacher who could lead me down that path and teach me practice methods, teach me music theory, teach me how to break through my weaknesses, how to play in a band, how to play with musicians, what was important about playing my role in the band as the guitar player, all these things. But it was at that time, again, it was just really guitar. That was my main instrument. And I was very serious about learning everything I could about it.
The first thing I want to say is he did a good job teaching you, because all the things you were trying to learn how to do, you've done so well. Oh. You've played with so many bands very tastefully. You're very versatile and all that kind of stuff. Was it that period where you flipped from this kind of pick playing electric to acoustic?
Well, interestingly, my acoustic influence goes back into my high school years. I'll give a call out to one of your earlier guests, or maybe two of your earlier guests on the podcast. When I was growing up in Philadelphia, there was a great late night ambient music program called Echoes, hosted by John Diliberto. And I had a little clock radio next to my bedside. And you just tune on the radio and try to find something to listen to at 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock, 11, whatever it was, as a teenager, whatever time I was listening. I think his show came on at 11 or 12 or something, so it must have been late night. Wow. And I just remember this sound that came from that little janky mono speaker on a clock radio. But the sound that came through that, the taste of John Diliberto, like what he was spinning at that time on records and CDs. He was curating a soundscape that was unlike anything else I had heard before, artists that I didn't know at the time. And he would intertwine these ambient pieces, and then all of a sudden this beautiful solo guitar thing would come on. And it was Will Ackerman, right? And this Windham Hill sound that was a part of Echoes. And that coincided with my love of the acoustic music coming from Led Zeppelin and trying to figure out what they were doing and unlocking Jimmy Page when he would play acoustic guitar in alternative tunings. And so I was retuning the guitar, trying to figure out this acoustic sound. All of a sudden, this music from Windham Hill started influencing me indirectly. I didn't even know what it was until I went to a record store when we used to have those at the mall. And I remember going through the cassette bin, and I found this Windham Hill bin at the store, and I didn't even know what it was, Windham Hill Records. And in there was the guitar sampler, and it was the music of Will Ackerman, Alex DeGrassi, Michael Hedges, and probably maybe a couple other guitar players. And I remember, again, at the time, there was no visual reference. I never saw these musicians. I didn't see them play. And so hearing this music for the first time when I pressed play, it was like hearing the guitar as if there were two guitar players or three guitar players playing at the same time. And I went, what is that sound? How are they doing that? And I just started listening over and over and over again. And that really expanded my mind into the power of the acoustic guitar. And so at that point, the acoustic and the electric really became joined together. I still love both equally, I would say, but I tend to play a lot of my own compositions on acoustic guitar, heavily influenced from that period of my life.
So as soon as you heard those guys, that really stopped you in your tracks and really shaped a new direction that you
It,
really wanted to go in.
I was really into being technically challenged on the guitar, and it was doing that, but it was also connecting to my heart. I was also a bit brokenhearted at that time in my life. I fell out of contact with my father. My parents were divorced, and music became the lifeblood or my healer, going through teenage years and all the ups and downs of being a teenager, and then throwing into that a broken family, a family that was disconnected. The thing that connected me back to my soul was music. And so I was in this kind of combination of technicality, but also it had to speak to my heart and make me cry or make me feel something. And so I was really into the emotional impact of music from early on, as well as the players that could play.
And when did you get into the idea of writing your own songs?
It happened early. I had an old Tascam 4-track cassette recorder from probably age 15 on. And so home recording and sitting in my room late at night and making music was a part of those early years. I could plug a guitar in and a singular microphone and just start exploring composition. A lot of my composing came from recording music, playing it back, listening to what I liked, what I didn't like. We had a little keyboard. We'd put in the sounds of streams or birds chirping together with a little bit of drums or something from a keyboard. And all that was happening from a really early age for me. I became really into recorded music and recording music from very early on.
Boy, how beautiful that those experiences just carried on as you grew up. You kept going into those experiences to hone them. We'll talk about more of that. When did you get into Indian music at Ali Akbar? You're a guy who's consuming a lot of information, trying to hack things, figure them out, and you're being impacted by just some of the greatest players in rock and new age and pop and all that.
It really ties back to Ravi Shankar and the Beatles and the influence he had on the Beatles and George Harrison. Again, that music was a part of my youth, and the fun, kind of whimsical side of the Beatles is what appealed to me when I was young. When I was in college, got really into listening into different levels of music and got into what was beyond the first layer when you listen to music, when you hear the melodies or the lyrics or the chorus and the beat, but like what's behind that? What's in the deeper layers of what these musicians were bringing into their music? And I started to hear one of the songs "Within You, Without You" from the Beatles. I always remember was really impactful. The lyrical message from George Harrison and this sitar, which I believe was George playing on the sitar, but the sound and the tabla drums in that track really pulled on my ear. And what is that? And right around that same time, there was a really great poet that came to the school I was attending. His name is Robert Bly. And he really wrote about what it is to be a man in this world, what it is to be a spiritual man. And the influence of poetry was something I really loved. And so I went to see him give his poetry in person to us. It was a Friday night. And he sat down in a rocking chair, and he was this kind of elder man with white hair and a beard. And on one side was a sitar player, and the other side was a tabla player. And he would speak his poetry, and these Indian musicians were just playing this music that was just out of this world. And I was, what is this music? And so fast forward a little bit into when I was studying with my teach, and I was playing in a band at that time called Maruma, and we were heavily world influenced, dance, world music kind of a thing. That was in my 20s, and I met a woman who came to our local yoga studio to do a workshop named Sylvia Nakash. And Sylvia became a dear friend to this day and heavily influential in my life in many ways musically. And she introduced me to a little bit more of a formal introduction into the raga music of India. I was trying to figure out what Ravi Shankar was doing on my guitar. I was retuning the guitar, but she taught me the raga music of India through the voice and through a simple process of connecting to a drone, tuning in the voice, and then learned a method of singing that we call sargam, which is sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, which is basically like the solfege syllables of the scale taught through Indian music, but as a real practice where you really learn how to sing the scale, sing the raga, the melodies. So she introduced me to this music and influenced it, and then said, you need to go to San Francisco and study with my teacher, Ali Akbar Khan, if you really want to learn this music. So she was really the catalyst for me to go to San Francisco and meet Ali Akbar Khan. At the time, he was in his 80s, and I was fortunate enough to have some time with him before he passed. His school started in the 60s. And so when you went into this setting, all the students were together in the room, and he would teach orally music, the ragas he would teach by singing. And the musicians would play back these ragas, and it was just an incredible experience. And I immediately fell in love with the true music of Indian classical and the devotion that it requires to play. And I became devoted to that path of music for quite a while, studying on the sarod, the instrument that Ali Akbar Khan plays.
You very kindly invited me to one of those sessions. I brought my guitar, you had your guitar, and he was on stage reciting parts of this song, raga, whatever.
Yeah.
And I gave up in the middle. It was so complex. I thought, I'm just going to be here and really respect what's going on and not try to do this.
Absolutely. The masters of that music are virtuosic masters. They really are. And I remember my first day, and I was so overwhelmed and felt so much like an infant, like I had no right to be in that room, musically speaking. Most of what was happening was just going so fast past me. But I remember feeling, if this is it, if this is all I get, it was so profound and so beautiful. And he was such a profound channel as a teacher that the impact of just being in the room with him and hearing that music just influenced my life forever with music. And I feel that as any of us that were able to even spend a day with Khansab, as we would call him, we were gifted with something that is very rare in the modern world. That music lineage goes back 500 years directly into their family. So this is teacher to student being passed down through generations and sharing this music orally and in a group setting like that. It was beautiful, beautiful experience.
Love that. And another big influence on you is nature. It's a big part of your music. It's a big part of your journey. It's a big part of how you listen. How did you get into nature early on, or was it something that came with musical discovery?
Yeah, it goes back to when my family moved. We were living in Philadelphia area, and we moved to the Pocono Mountains, which is along the Appalachian Mountains on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. And we lived out in the country there. And so became rather isolated at that time of my life as a young person. I spent a tremendous amount of time outdoors by myself in nature. And I can still remember in my memory of sound and heart memories the insects in the summer and the nature, the crickets, the katydids, these evening summer sounds that would just resonate through this countryside in Pennsylvania. And there was a stream in the back and this little trickling sound of the stream. These sounds became just essential for my imagination, for my experience of the world, and my love of sound that I think became finely tuned at that time. And then when I went away to school and then came back home to Pennsylvania, I needed to go away somewhere. I just needed to start my life. And so I went to Arizona at that time in my early 20s. And one of the most impactful things that tied the music into nature for me was I would go out into the desert, and I would go out and watch the sunsets in the city of Phoenix. Would be way far away. I would travel about an hour out into the desert and just sit on a mountainside and play a hand drum at that time. I had this hand drum, and I would watch the sunset. And I had these experiences where I felt complete oneness with nature and sound and the colors from the sunset. And I just started to really feel this connection with nature and music as this singular thing that was connected and not different. And then over the years, that just became a through line of my influence and sound, which was how nature impacts the acoustics of the space, how it impacts the inspiration of a composition. You know, all these things it just becomes connected. There's no disconnect there.
All right, let's jump into your collaborations. When I first met you in 2009, 2010, you were playing with Ramesh Kannan. I think you were touring. I'm not sure who you were playing with at the time. I might have seen you in San Diego, and then we met in person.
Yeah.
Then you later went on to tour with Snatam Kaur, GuruGanesha Singh, and were very involved in the mantra community. Tell me about those days and how you went from Todd Boston arriving in California to being on tour, playing at all the festivals, etc. Wanderlust, Bhakti Fest. You were all over the place.
When I was living in Arizona, to go back into my 20s, I was playing in clubs. I was studying the guitar. I was being influenced by this band I was playing in Maruma. And it was a really musically rich time. But I was working a day job, and my nights and my free time was where I would play music. But it wasn't a career at that stage. And what I found was, even though I was growing as a musician and I loved music, I would play out at the club and I would come home and I was judging myself so much that it wasn't very fun, because my ego was so tied up in whether I played well that night. If it was the best concert, my ego was tied up in it. If it was the worst concert, my ego was tied up into it. I would criticize my bandmates. I was not always a great bandmate because I would say, oh, you didn't play the right part or something. It was just competitive and ego-driven, my own relationship with my music at that time. And I just decided it wasn't working. It wasn't enough. And so I started soul searching for something. And I started to break away from my life there and travel to California and meet new people and do new things. And so my first trip into California, I volunteered at a festival called the Earth Dance Festival. And so I'm looking for something new. I go to this far out music festival in the middle of an ancient oak forest in Northern California. And I volunteered in the back, where they have a kitchen where they serve the musicians, basically meals. So it's backstage of the main stage. They're serving food and I'm cleaning dishes and doing this volunteer work. And so I got in the back door of this music festival and I just was enamored by the scene. And I was looking at this big main stage and I'm watching all kinds of musicians come and go and soloists. And at one time they had a tweener act, they called it, when there was a performer in between the main acts. And so I'm watching this thing unravel backstage where they didn't have their tweener act. They didn't show up. So I run to my van and I grab my acoustic guitar and I run to the bottom of this big stairway that goes up into the main stage. And this guy looks down at me and I go, I have my guitar. I'm ready to go on the stage. And he looked at me like I was insane. Like, who are you? And why would I let you on the stage right now? And I never got on the stage that day. I continued to wash dishes for the musicians. But 2 years later, I was on that main stage playing. So it was like the manifest destiny thing. It was just something I wanted so much that I was just pushing through doors to get there. And it didn't happen at that exact moment, but over time it did. And
that's the way things happen.
That's the way things happen. The other parallel thing was this emptiness, or this ego-driven music part of me was wanting something more. And my friend took me to this woman they call Amma, and she's the hugging saint is what she's known for. And it was in San Ramon, California. We went to this all-night event where this woman from India is on stage with musicians chanting and playing beautiful music around her. And for 16 or 17 hours, she basically hugged 3,000 to 4,000 people went through the line. One by one, she hugs somebody. She whispers something. She says a mantra and the next person comes. And being a kid from Philly, this was very different and new for me. And I was a skeptic, and I went through the whole night watching her never get up, never do anything but hug people. And at the end, the skeptic in me is like, what is she doing this for? Why? And she stood up and started throwing rose petals at whoever was left at 11 o'clock the next morning. And I just got tears in my eyes. And I realized that she was teaching us selfless service, the act of selfless service, one person at a time, one hug at a time. If you can be present with someone, show them love, that's enough to make the world a better place. And that was like a revelation to the musician in me that thought I had to be famous to be impactful and to play in front of huge crowds. And so I took that philosophy and volunteered at a children's hospital with my guitar, and I was playing flute. I played in a band with a friend that taught me to play flute. And so I would go to this children's hospital with a little hand drum and a flute and a guitar and volunteer and just really do what you would call music therapy or sound healing. I wasn't trained in it, but music was that for me. And so I just would go in and I would say a little prayer of, let me get out of the way and just let the music work its magic. And through that experience, I saw the real one-on-one healing effects of sound in a hospital setting where most of the sound is life and death, these machines that are beeping and making the sounds of vital organs, pacing what the heart rate is. The music in a hospital like that is virtually non-existent, at least it was at that time. And to bring live music into those rooms was noticeably impactful and transformative for the children and the families I was able to work with. And that changed my whole life. And from that point on, I really approached music as a healing force to be given selflessly to each person one by one, no matter the size of the stage, like always playing for the one person that might be there to get what it is that you're giving, kind of a thing. So opening
Yeah.
up to the music as a channel, right? As the gift that it is.
Yeah. It's nice to see all these kind of influences come into your life. Let's go into your recordings. Now, you released Alive in 2010. Was that the first album?
Yeah, and that ties in. And sorry, I avoided your question, which was,
I
the
know you did.
collaborations, but it tied in because that's when I met Ramesh, and
Yeah.
then Ramesh and we actually recorded an album together called Urban Nature, and he and I had a duo for many years, and then collaborated with many other artists. But Ramesh Kannan is an amazing tabla player, studied with some of the greats. Zakir Hussain and others, and he became influential because he tied the Indian music into my guitar and allowed me to learn to express my own guitar playing with an amazing world percussionist in that way, and helped me to really grow and became a dear friend, one of my best friends to this day.
Did
And
he
so
introduce you into the devotional community?
he did. He was playing with Snatam Kaur. They were touring. He was playing with GuruGanesha and Snatam Kaur in a band, and the band split in a certain way. GuruGanesha left the band, which left a void as the guitarist. And then they invited me to play with them in India at that time in Rishikesh, going back to the Beatles, where the Beatles ashram is. It's funny how it all tied in.
Mm.
And it was on that trip where I first played with Snatam Kaur and started that journey. Also met my beautiful wife, Andrea, on that trip as well, which is an amazing side story. We fell in love, and here we are now, 13 years later, married and happily with our son, Max, which is very cool. For me, it's like music brought me to India. Music gave me this gift and gave me this amazing family now. To me, it's like the music is really like an entity almost, where it is a spiritual practice, but also a spiritual being, a goddess of sorts, this amazing force of music that just seems to, when we open to it, open doors for us and lead us into beautiful things. And so Ramesh introduced me into that kind of family of musicians, and I continued to tour together with them. We toured together for about 3 years. Ramesh and Snatam and I traveled all over the world, from India to North America, South America, Russia, all over Europe. I really was able to do the touring musician gig, which was something I always wanted to do, and really got to see the world and play in some beautiful theaters and performing arts halls across the world, which was wonderful.
Indeed, you have. Really. All right, so let's go back to your first album, Alive. I love this album because it's classic you. Songs like Sunday Morning, simple, innocent, gentle melodies, a lot of space, incredible guitar tone, the harmonics. you're playing the flutes, you're playing everything except percussion, right?
Yeah, Ramesh played a little bit of percussion. I think our friend Matthew Shaning played a cello on the track
Right.
Twilight. But everything else was born out of my desire to merge my live looping performance together with the studio. And so that project was actually a lot of it was my using my looper in the studio to layer out the music and play it live in real-time recording. And then I did go back and edit and change things a little bit. It wasn't a pure looping album, but that was what inspired that album. I was trying to translate my live performance in the studio and connect the two, because live looping became a huge part of my live performance as well. Yeah.
It did indeed. I remember that. And how would you describe your musical voice during those early projects? Like, what were you trying to convey? Was it the combination of all the things you just talked about?
I was traveling so much. I was kind of a free bird. I was not really, I didn't have a home necessarily. I was a musician. I was the gypsy musician life at that point, trying to find any opportunity. I was spending a lot of time in nature. The music that I was creating at that point was coming from music that I had written in my youth to music that I wrote sitting next to the ocean or in a forest, inspired by nature. I had begun exploring playing music in live yoga classes, and I would always record the music that was coming through in a very improvisational way. And so I would capture a little handheld recorder, capturing some of those live yoga sessions, and that would inform perhaps a compositional idea, a melody, or something that I didn't expect that came from improvisation and a healing environment where the sound was nurturing the yoga students to do their practice. And so it allowed for some interesting music to come through. I would capture those improvisations. And so Alive was a culmination of a collection of music that had been in me for a lot of years and music that I was writing at that time. And so I brought it together. It was the first album that really kind of said, this is Todd Boston. This is the sound that really became me, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that album. And then you started working with Will. You recorded your breakthrough album, Touched by the Sun, with him. And that really got you a lot of attention. I mean, a fantastic album, which I actually heard part of on Sirius XM this morning.
Cool.
Right after I was working on the questions for this, I get in the car and boom,
Amazing.
there's Todd Boston.
It wouldn't be fair for me to talk about that project without directly tying that to you and I, because now this goes back to the beginning of your conversation with me when we met, which we met in San Francisco. My memory serves me.
Right.
I was playing at a yoga conference, and there was a Friday night event. We had a friend from San Diego, Mario Kovic, right, which introduced us. And we got together within a week. I think we were hanging out just with two guitars sitting in a living room somewhere in Marin County, California. And like you said, we just became instant brothers and friends and had this common language of the guitar. And we were able to play together right away. We shared this way that we approached the guitar, I think, and the way we played. And so our friendship became deeply impactful. And in that conversation, you said, yeah, I'm working on this album with Will Ackerman. And it stopped me in my tracks, and I said, the Will Ackerman? Because he was, so influential on my musical life. He was there. And so I was deeply impressed by you, whoever this, kind of mystical Shambhu human was that just stumbled into my life and said the words Will Ackerman. I thought, who is this, who is this human that's sitting across from me playing guitar right now? And you very generously invited me to a session in LA. And during the recording of your album, Sacred Love, I was able to be a fly on the wall in a recording session. And I remember being at the studio in Los Angeles, and I was sitting as quietly as I could in the corner. Will Ackerman came in, and you were co-producing with him. You guys were really busy working on the music and really producing the artists that you were there to record and working with the audio engineers. And I was just taking it all in and just loving the moment. And I remember meeting Will and saying, very nice to meet you, sir, very formal on my behalf. And at the end, we're walking down the hallway, and I remember I had my Alive album, and I handed him Alive. And I said, Mr. Ackerman, it's been such a great honor to watch you work and to meet you today. And, this is some of my own music, and I'm such a fan. Thank you so much. I never expected anything to come of it. I just literally was able to give one of my childhood guitar heroes an album of my own. It felt that was enough. It was fulfilling. He emailed me a few weeks later, and he had listened to the whole album and broken it down song by song and wrote me this beautiful email where he criticized everything, told me what worked, told me what didn't work. I mean, he dug into it, he listened to it, and he said, Todd, I think you do too much sometimes. Sometimes you just throw the kitchen sink at your music. It's so much going on. And at the same time, I think it's really great and I love it. And I think I can help you take it to another level. And that started the conversation of Touched by the Sun and this relationship with Will Ackerman that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for our friendship and for you opening that door for me and inviting me that day to the studio. So thank you.
You're welcome. I remember at the time that I was saying to myself, this guy is so deserving that, and I actually said to you, I said, you know what? I'll fly you down to LA to meet him. I'll fly you down. And you said, no, you don't have to do that. I was honored because you're such a deserving, talented guy, and you were incredibly kind to me. You know, I used to hitchhike with you to some of these festivals and try to jam with you while you were doing your thing. I mean, it's all a beautiful thing when people help each other.
And you brought so much generosity with everything that you had with music at that time, everything you were doing. You were mentoring me in many ways of how to level up and how to work with really top-notch players. And you were working with Tony Levin from Peter Gabriel. And, you were working with Eugene Friesen and through this kind of network of wills. But you were showing me that when you reach high, you can up your game by surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. And this was a really insightful and impactful, life-changing musical relationship for me. You were integral in helping me become where I am now in my life in many ways. So again, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what did you take away from Will about guitar, tone, space, authenticity? What did you take away from working with him? Because I found it to be also life-changing just to look at how he did what he did and what was he listening for in the sound and stuff like that. What did you take away?
His influence at that time was so vast and across many levels of my musical life. And the first thing he did that was impactful and that I learned from him was even before we got in the studio, we were doing these email exchanges about budgets and musicians, and I became overwhelmed. And I think I was so used to controlling things that I began questioning his methods. And I remember I got an email from him one day, and he said, Todd, you don't trust me. And if you don't trust me, we can't do this. So I'm out because you don't trust me and we can't do this, period. Good luck to you. And I freaked out, man, because this was like my opportunity going up in flames to work with this amazing human and producer. And Shambhu had introduced me and I'm blowing it, just by being me. And so this was a deep reflective moment. He's right. I am not trusting him. I'm not letting go. And I wrote him right away. I said, we have a meeting for the first time in person after the recording studio in Vermont in a month. Can you just not cancel that? Can I come and see you, please? He honored that. My best friend was going to travel from Philadelphia to Vermont with me to meet Will at his studio for the first time. And he canceled last minute. And my mom goes, well, I could go with you. And I go, Mom, this is important. I don't think I should bring my mom. And she goes, I'll just go to a cafe while you're in the meeting. I go, okay. So we show up at Will's place. My mom gets out of the car. My mom and Will meet and they ignore me they just walk. They become instantly connected. He loves my mom. And, all of a sudden they're talking and he shakes oh, hi, Todd. He's talking to my mom. Come on in, come and see the studio. Next thing you know, we're sitting upstairs in Will's studio. We're on the couch. My mom's on one side, I'm on the other, and Will's in between us. And he starts sharing his life story with us. Now, going back to trust. Now I'm there with my mom. He's sharing his life story about how he was adopted and how his adopted mother committed suicide and how devastating that was to him and how music saved him. And he's crying. And I'm there with my mom and we're hugging him while he's crying. Now talk about creating a trust moment. And
Wow.
that was the singular moment where the project was on. We built trust in that moment. And I said, Will, I trust you with everything. I'm surrendered. You show me the way. And that opened up Touched by the Sun because I trusted him and I let him produce me and I let go and I became the artist and he was the producer. And so he taught me about trust. He taught me about letting people play their roles. And he taught me about listening to the emotional depth of the music versus technicality. He would always pick the take that was the most emotionally rich, even if it wasn't technically perfect. And he taught me how to bring musicians into the studio and let them shine. He taught me so much about tone of guitar and recording guitar so it sounded pristine and acoustically rich and beautiful, all the instruments. And yeah, just so many areas that continue to be a part of who I am. And he really inspired me to really own the producer role as a musician, producer kind of a thing.
Love that. Let's jump into your own studio. You're a musician. You had your 4-track cassette recorder.
Yeah.
So you're involved in multi-tracking and all that. And then you built your own studio at Magic Cottage in Lagunitas. I recorded my album Soothe there in
Yeah.
2017. You
Yeah.
mixed it and actually co-produced that with me.
Yeah.
And then when you moved to Portland, you built a studio yourself, just like Will Ackerman, cut the wood, put everything together, your own custom vision. And then I remember you called me one day and said, Shambhu, I'm investing in Dolby Atmos.
Mm.
I said, what's that? And then you started convincing me about Dolby Atmos to get me bought into it, which I definitely bought into it. What are you trying to do as a artist with a studio and a producer and all that? That's kind of part of a larger vision for you.
Yeah, it is. When I left Will's Imaginary Road Studios, I was very inspired and influenced by his life there. And just to say, he milled the wood and built his own studio from scratch.
Yeah.
My situation is definitely different. I mean, I retrofitted a room here, but Will is definitely, he's a builder. That's part of who he is. And so the life that he had, where he had this kind of property with a recording studio and was able to nurture musicians and artists, that became a thing that I partnered with my wife Andrea. And when we were in Lagunitas at Magic Cottage Studios, that's what we were trying to create, was this environment where it was an artist retreat and we would go into the nature. And as you know, the nature there was rich, and the deer were there and the raccoons were there and the birds were there. We would see the animals through the windows of the studio. So you were in
I
nature.
remember.
The music flowed in a really beautiful way there. The aesthetics of the cottage added to the charm. You listen back to all those recordings we did, and there's something infused that's beyond everything else that we did, the music, the instruments, the musicians. It's that space. And that's something that I love about recording, is that the space becomes a character in the story of every recording. It's behind the scenes. It's the quietness of the impact of the influence. You don't know that it's there, but these recordings become infused with the space as well. And so that studio was really about nurturing the artist and trying to create this experience. But it proved to be kind of difficult to do, and I couldn't frame it the same way. Will had his own unique experiences and resources to do that. And then we had a child, and we found that the cottage became restrictive and small. And so we moved away from the cottage eventually here to Portland, Oregon. And we were all in lockdown mode and not working together in studios. And my music touring life was deeply impacted. Previously I was touring and producing, and both of those jobs became obsolete during COVID, during the lockdown, I should say, because they required people being together, right? So that changed my framework, and needing to be a husband and a father and provider, I needed to really get into my production chops, which I could do remotely with anybody across the world via the internet, right? And so that became an essential part of my business at that time, and what inspired me to build this studio into an immersive audio room, an immersive audio mix room, that was influenced because I went to Best Buy and I listened to a Dolby Atmos mix in a home theater installment that they had at Best Buy. And the sound was 360 and immersive, and it gave me chills, and I had a tear in my eye. And it was really amazing. This is before Dolby Atmos was even a music thing. It was only in film, really. And so I got really into trying to understand it and learning, and I set my sights on creating this Dolby Atmos studio. And right when I was in the planning stages, Apple Music said, we're launching Dolby Atmos. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm late. I got to do this. And so I became even more obsessed. And the immersive audio element to me is this, like, come to the final moment of my love of recorded music. The thing about stereo, which is a perfect format because it just is, it has delivered all this great music to us, but it's kind of 2D and flat in certain ways. In other words, you have to mix all the music into a very contained space. And with immersive audio, all of a sudden that space is expanded tremendously. And so this vision artistically of this immersive sound field, which is how we dream our music, it has space for it in the immersive format. And I love that. And a lot of what I do now is mixed into stereo, but it's also mixed into immersive audio. So we have the best of both worlds happening. And that's the work that you and I have done together, where we focus on stereo because that is the way most people will listen to the music, but we are also able to expand that stereo field into this immersive field, and the listeners that can receive that format, they're getting the best of what we have to offer as artists and creators.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate it. I would say adoption is probably not as fast as I want to see it on the home side, but
I agree.
It's still very viable, and if you can hear it in Dolby Atmos, it's impressive. And you've done some really impressive projects outside of just recorded music. You did this immersive film, Orbital,
Yeah.
which was playing all over the place. Tell me about that, because that was something you wanted to get into, and you've gotten into that. And then you're working on something called Symphony of Silence.
Yeah. So this idea of immersive audio, again, I'm very passionate about it. I just believe it's a very natural evolution of sound and audio production. And I think we're a little ahead of the game still. I do think the future is very much heading towards immersive formats. Now, Dolby Atmos is the current main one. There will be others that will come in. But this idea of listening in a broader spectrum of space, I think is going to become just infused into the music and the sound fields that we're used to listening to. It won't even be a conversation. So we're future proofing by what we're doing right now in many ways. But when I cracked open this huge, vast world of immersive audio, I realized that it was about live performance and live playback in spaces that were built for immersive audio. So again, it's kind of like manifest destiny, is like you kind of just start pushing against things. And I was really fortunate because I have a unique skill set with this immersive audio. I get unique calls from unique people and projects. And I received a message from a great film composer named Justin Lee Radford. And he was working on a film project called Orbital and contacted me to help with the immersive mix. They wanted him to go to LA. He's here in Portland. He said, I found an immersive engineer here. I'd prefer to work with him. They gave him the okay, and that introduced me to this amazing project. The premise of the project is these interviews that were conducted with astronauts from NASA. The astronaut goes to space and observes the Earth in this giant vastness of space. And in that experience of seeing Earth from a distance, the astronaut pretty much consistently 100% of the time or close to that, these astronauts have some kind of a spiritual awakening of some sort, and they call that the overview effect. And they see their life on this little blue marble in space. And it's this thing that all the astronauts can talk about, no matter their religious or spiritual background. They each have their own experience, but the film is these interviews. You don't see the astronauts, you hear them. And my friend Justin created the sound bed. We had an LA sound designer give us all the special effects. And we go to Los Angeles and they have this giant 280-degree screen that's all around you. And you are in outer space looking at the Earth like you're on the space station going around, orbiting around the Earth while you're listening to these astronaut interviews talk about their life experiences. This beautiful music. It was incredible immersive experience. And so I was the immersive mix engineer on that project. And that partly led me to a project that I'm working on now called The Symphony of Silence. And that is about the sacredness of nature sounds and the silence of nature. And a really incredible human named Gordon Hempton is a famous field recordist. He goes into nature and captures these beautiful sounds of nature. And so I'm a sound designer on the project, one of the musicians, composers, as well as the immersive mix engineer. So a lot of the work I'm doing in film and visuals, I would almost call myself an immersive sound designer. Now I am mixing, but you're designing the sound for the space. And the idea is that these films are being played back in immersive rooms where the sound and the visuals are deeply immersive.
Beautiful. And you released a really lovely album called ANAM this year. And
Yeah.
you have another one going for 2026. But tell me about ANAM. It's really gorgeous.
Thank you. Anam was really the idea of me connecting to some of my own cultural roots and ancestry in the Scottish and Gaelic Celtic worlds. And Anam means soul or kind of the life force, the breath. It's this essence of our soul, of our spirit. This album is a collection of songs of me playing solo and then also with some really great musicians. Benji Wertheimer on Esraj, a good friend Joshua McLean plays cello on a track, and then a collaboration that I did with Jeff Oster, our good friend, on trumpet. And so there's a little bit of collaboration happening and then some of my own compositions. And yeah, it's just an acoustic album. It was something that just happened kind of easily. It's just an album that just, there it was. It just kind of came out. And so, yeah. So, and I'm looking forward to our collaboration together. I'm hoping you and I can make some music.
Yes,
We've
me
talked
too.
about that in 2026. And so we've got some stuff cooking and yeah,
Yeah.
and some new projects that I'm working on, both solo and then also in collaboration with others.
Anything we haven't covered that you'd like to cover?
We live in a time that is so unique because here's music that travels through our ancestry as humans for thousands of years. And perhaps as long as humans have been together in family, clans, tribes, music has been an essential part of the human experience. And I think we're just maybe getting back to some ancient knowledge about what music is. And what music is for us in the modern world is it's entertainment, it's a commodity, it's this thing that streams on streaming platforms, it's technology, it's MIDI controllers and instruments, and it's all these things. And it is all of those things, and those things are fun and interesting. But at the core of it, music is this deeply profound human and universal thing. Like the scales that we play are literally the harmonic overtone series written into the universe's DNA. The math of music is something that is so beyond our capacity to even understand what's happening. And it's unique in its form as art because all the other forms of art are visual or movement oriented, but music is this unseen thing. It's the invisible, and it touches us in such a profound way that it has the capacity to transform us on a cellular level, on a vibrational level, because it's like bridging us to really who we are and what we are, which is vibration in this vast universe. And so I think, when we have these music careers and our aspirations, all of it is worthy and is real and it's authentic and it's what we're doing and who we are. But there's also this bigger thing that we are a part of that is music. And I think for you and I and we as artists, we're gifted with this responsibility and this ability to connect to it and to share it with others. And I feel like it's also part of our responsibility to remind people that music is everyone. It's everybody's. It's not about how many people show up to the concert or how many albums are sold or what Grammys people have won or what we've accomplished. Like, that's all great, but that only exists in a very, very tiny sliver of the history of our humanness. And I think what's unique is like that's almost becoming irrelevant again. And I see us evolving as humans back into focusing on what music is, which is a sacred spiritual thing. That should be the foundation that as humans we receive and experience music.
And what do you think about AI in that context?
I think that AI music is kind of revealing the reality of music is that music is math. It is mathematical computation. You can throw numbers, mathematical numbers together, translate it into music, and it becomes music. So it's not surprising to me that a computer is fully capable of reproducing the idea of music and delivering it. But you and I both know bringing somebody into a room and playing guitar for them or singing a psalm with them or playing a concert is a uniquely human experience. And so my hope and belief is that, yeah, AI music, sure, it's going to exist. It's part of the commodity of music, but it's not the reality of music. The reality of music is that it doesn't matter how it gets to you. It matters how it affects you. And ultimately, acoustic instruments in a room or humming to yourself or singing to your child or sitting around a fire with other humans playing drums, this is real music. This is the music that impacts you the most. And I think when you listen to music through a computer and then you go into a living room or into a concert hall and you hear music, there's just no doubt the profound difference between those two. So my belief is, yeah, humans, we're going to keep seeking music experiences in the real world because that is amazing. That's like the best.
Beautiful. Super inspiring, my friend and brother. My heartfelt thanks to you, Todd, for joining me today. And you can explore more about Todd's music productions and upcoming projects at toddboston.com. And I'll add a link to the episode description. And if today's conversation moved you, inspired you, or opened a new window into the creative process, please like, follow, and share Shambhu Sessions wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Shambhu, and until the next time, stay open, stay inspired, and keep listening.